I am, of course, astrologer coach Sonja Francis. Most of you know me through my videos or through my weekly forecast, my weekly blogs that I do on my website and on YouTube and on Facebook and on Twitter. So, but for those of you who don't know me, this is who I am. And I want to just thank you very, very much from the bottom of my heart for taking the time today to be here with me, taking the energy. I know it's a very busy time right now. I know there's a lot going on in most of your people's lives. I'm sure there's lots going on in my life. And so I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, and also, spending the money and spending the energy and the time. And so I'm really committed to making this a really good experience for you guys. Make sure that it's a valuable use of your time. So at the end of this webinar, we're going to have a Q&A, like Anna already announced. And this is a really great place to make sure that you get the maximum value of this webinar, because you really get to ask your own questions at that point, and it will answer as many questions as I possibly can. Now, I want you to also come away with something from this webinar that you can use right away without any further astrology training or any further astrology schooling, so that you can have something that some kind of nugget that you can take away with you from this webinar. Does that sound good? Shall we get started? Is everybody with me? Just want to make sure everyone's in there. Okay, there's a star, there's a yes, there's a thumbs up. Awesome. Okay, great. Thanks everybody. Thanks for your feedback. Now, what is soul-based astrology, and how is it different from other astrology, right? I mean, this is kind of what we're trying to understand here, coming here today. So soul-based astrology basically is love-based, comes from a love-based model rather than a fear-based model. Okay? So that's kind of the gist of it. And what I want to try to accomplish with soul-based astrology is to really focus on the evolution of us as human beings, and also on a soul level. And I also want to focus on integration. So integration of all of our energies so that we can become whole and complete, and that we can really live in our wholeness. Because whenever a person is whole, that's when the person is really powerful and really empowered. So that's really part of the journey of soul-based astrology. Now, the other part of soul-based astrology is also knowing your soul's journey and knowing your soul purpose. Okay, so there's those components, of course, as well, because it is about, what did we come here to do? What did we come here to explore on a soul level? And this is, of course, very interesting to our own path as well, right? Because this is why we're here, or at least that's what I believe. This is why we're here. So I wanted to share a little bit about myself, just so you guys get an understanding of how I came to this approach with soul-based astrology. Is that okay with you guys if I share a little bit about me before we continue? Just want to make sure everyone's okay with that. Okay, great. So far, there are no no's. Okay, awesome. All right. So basically, I've been studying astrology for the past 20 years, and I got my certification in astrology in 2005 with traditional astrology. And I began to notice that a lot of times when I looked at my chart, I felt very anxious looking at my chart, especially my transits and what was going on in my life. And also sometimes when I was getting readings from astrologers, I would also sometimes feel a little bit anxious, after a reading or something, just feeling a little bit like nervous about what's coming up, and, what am I doing with my life? And so because I was for a very long time on a path of personal development, in that process, I also became a life and a relationship coach. And I also had a relationship seminar company with my husband, and we led relationship seminars together. And that really helped me to kind of get a different point of view of astrology and how to use astrology. And as a coach, when you work one-on-one with people, it's really very much about, that the other person is whole, complete, and perfect as they are. And that, you as the coach are really just trying to open up and guide others to that truth, that they are whole and complete. And that everything that comes up in a session is useful. And so I kind of used that model for astrology as well, because, when you're able to look at astrology and see that you can use everything that is in the chart, and that everything is perfect in the chart as it is, then you really can integrate it much better. And, also, I understand that, each of us too, of course, has parts of ourselves that we try to hide or we try to get rid of or that we don't love so much. But these pieces that we actually try to avoid or try to not integrate, a lot of times, they are the greatest keys to our empowerment and to our wholeness. So it's very important. I mean, astrology, I think, is a really fantastic tool in that way to really integrate these things, because you can see everything in the chart. You can see what the energies are and what's there. So this is basically the reason why I started a different approach to astrology, because of, that background. And I really also always felt the need that, it is important that people feel empowered. And I always felt the need for myself also that I wanted to feel empowered and not disempowered, by a tool like astrology, right? And I didn't want to use it as a crutch or as an excuse, to say, oh, I can't do this because in my chart I have, Mars in Pisces, and so of course I can't be successful, or whatever, right? So I think it's important that we don't use astrology as that kind of a tool, that kind of helps us be a victim in the world, but rather help make it a tool that helps us be whole and integrated and really understand all of who we are and feel empowered therefore, right? So, obviously any tool, is just as useful or as powerful as the consciousness of the person that uses the tool, right? And I have a really lovely analogy there, which is that, when you think of when you think of a tool, right? What do you think of right away? I mean, in the real world, when we think of tool, I think of like a hammer or something like that you use in the real world to get things done, right? And like if you think of a hammer, right? I mean, if a person uses a hammer and is not conscious in how they use the hammer, right? And actually, let me be so clear and show you my slide here, because I have this awesome slide I can pull up for you. We have a hammer. So, if you have a person that uses a tool in an unconscious way, like a hammer, right? It can harm other people. The person can harm themselves when they're using it too impulsively. And, that's, of course, it's important that we have awareness when we use a tool, and that we use a tool in a way that serves ourselves and other people. And so, of course, with a hammer, the potential is there to harm or even kill somebody, right? But the potential is also there to just, hang up a beautiful painting and make your environment more beautiful, right? Because you have that tool to use it, to do something with it. Is everybody with me so far, or am I going too fast? I just want to check in with everybody. Just want to make sure everyone's with me and is enjoying it so far. Tim is blown away. Okay, excellent. Ashaya, I hope I say that right. Yeah, she's smiling. Very good. Jacqueline is giving me through that. Okay, great. Everybody's doing great, liking it. Fantastic. So, so how does the hammer thing relate to astrology, right? I mean, I guess it's pretty obvious, but let's talk a little bit about astrology. I mean, astrology is a very powerful tool, and let me give you a little bit of a slide here as well, because I have another slide. Yaha! Now, astrology is a science that was based on observation already since the early Stone Ages, 25,000 years ago. And here you can see, that picture is a picture of in the Stone Ages when they were, I think this was in Ireland, when they were measuring the moon movement and the sun movement with the stones, right? And the modern Western system is based on the observations by the Babylonians, which is roughly 4,500 years ago, right? So as you can see, this is like an ancient, this is something that the Babylonians made up on. I think it's like a stone thing. And this is something that's been like an ancient tool that has been used for a very, very long time. So of course it's a very, very powerful tool. Now today, we learn a lot of the interpretations that we learn about astrology. We learn that from books or websites, and what we read, what we learn from other astrologers, and it's a really great start to do that, But I have always found that to use the tool of astrology more consciously, it's very important that we keep in alliance with the fact that this is a science that's based on observation, and that we need to observe what a planet or an aspect means for us personally, like what's occurring in our lives when we're experiencing particular aspects, and also because that also helps us to get out of this fear-based model, because sometimes when you read on a website, Saturn squares the sun, and you immediately go into spasm because you're like, oh my God, this is going to be a terrible time for me. I'm not going to get anything done. It's going to be horrible. But when you observe that square in your chart as it's happening, and you see what kind of adjustments you're making at that time, and what kind of progress you're making in your life, you can really see how it's maybe not so, maybe it's a good thing that it's happening in that moment in time, that this needs to happen for you to move something forward in terms of your manifestation process, in terms of your maturity process, right? So as you can see, observation is really a really important part of astrology in using it consciously. Now, the same is true for transits and progressions. We want to make sure that we know, at a particular time in our lives how that shows up, not just in our natal chart, but also through, how the planets move in the sky in relationship to our natal chart every day, right? Now, in my own experience, using observation with the chart, with anybody's chart, my own chart, other people's chart, and compassion is really these are two key elements when studying astrology. That's my own experience. Especially when we're interpreting something, we really need to make sure that we use observation and compassion rather than judgment and fear. And this is really important, because judgment and fear, in my experience, they exclude and repress energies. Observation and compassion includes and nurtures energies. So it's really serving the purpose of wholeness and the purpose of empowerment when we do that, right? And that makes sense, right, guys? Are you guys with me? Does that make sense, what I'm sharing here? Just want to check in with you again. Absolutely. Okay, good. Good. I just want to make sure I didn't lose anybody yet. Okay, with me. All right, always feel free to let me know if I'm going too fast, okay? I'm just trying to cover, everything in time, so that I don't go over. All right, so let's continue. So my goal with Soul-Based Astrology is basically just bringing a heart connection, to this complex intellectual tool, because astrology is also quite an intellectual tool. It's very complex. There's a lot of things that we have to be able to understand, that we have to keep in our minds and have to visualize, and, it's definitely complex, right? The other goal that I have with Soul-Based Astrology is to really see it from a soul's perspective, to see it from a higher perspective rather than from our mental conditioning. Because our mental conditioning, very easily goes to a judgmental place and wants to go to looking at the bad stuff of what's happening and the things that we have to watch out for. Right? Because the mind, the conditioned mind wants to protect us. It wants to keep us safe. So that's what it does. It goes to the places that could possibly go wrong or could possibly be bad, so that we can do something about it. But the problem with that is when we do that, when we come from the conditioned mind, we're missing all the gold. We're missing all the good stuff. So it's a lot harder to kind of look for the gold by digging through all the other stuff. But when you train yourself to really look for the gold in a chart and in a transit and in a progression, then that's really valuable for yourself and for other people, right? Now, I want to be clear here. When I talk about looking for the gold, I'm not talking about painting a rose-colored picture. I'm not saying distorting the impact of a particular energy. That's not what I'm talking about. But what I am talking about is really looking to see how can we use the birth chart or a transit in regards to creating some excitement for growth rather than a sense of doom in our heart, because the mind tends to go to these extreme places and to these worst case scenario places, right? But what we really want to do is we want to be able to see, well, how can I grow from this? How can I expand my human experience through this aspect, through this thing in my chart that I see in my chart, right? Now, when you think about it, right, I mean, when you feel victimized by a planet or by sign or by something in your chart, that cannot really be of value or it cannot really inspire growth, right? I mean, so that's really something to think about. Do we want to be victimized by our aspects in our chart? Do we want to be victimized by particular planetary placements, right? I mean, I don't think it's a good idea to approach astrology in that way. It's certainly not empowering, right? So it's really, I mean, I want to go back to this, and I know I've said this before already, but the process of becoming whole really involves honoring all of our energies. And so in astrology, it's really about embracing all planets, embracing all signs in our natal chart. And it means, really loving and accepting ourselves fully and completely once we've been able to do that, And so I really want to inspire as many people as possible to use the birth chart and transits and progressions to be conscious about, the different energy shifts that are happening, living on purpose, developing an understanding and compassion for ourselves and others, and really being able to grow on a human level and on a soul level, right? So what I really recommend, for those of you who already know their natal chart, and for those of you who already know the signs of the zodiac, I really recommend embrace all zodiac signs, all of them, because you have every single one of those signs somewhere in your chart, somewhere in your natal chart. And if you look at the chart that's on the whiteboard right now, you can see all of the signs are part of that circle. That circle includes all of the signs. It doesn't just say, your sun sign's there and all the other signs are outside the circle. No, they're all in the same circle. And that means we need to embrace that circle because that circle is us. So, I want to give a couple of examples, but I just want to make sure before I jump into the examples, is everybody with me so far? Is everybody enjoying this and getting something out of this? Just want to see. Cool, yay. Oh yes, we're all. Okay, excellent. So everybody's good, very good. All right. So so as an example, I want to give Scorpio. Scorpio is one of those signs that a lot of people have sort of like a love-hate relationship with, right? And traditionally, if you look at traditional astrology, Scorpio is seen as a very intense sign. It's secretive. It can be a suspicious sign, vengeful, sometimes even violent. I wanted to also actually give a personal example here because, I went to this astrology meeting like a couple of months ago, and something came up about the moon being in Scorpio. We talked about a chart. It was like, advanced astrologers. And so we talked about the chart and the moon in Scorpio came up and everybody in the room at the same time went, ooh, that's bad. Ooh. And it was really shocking. I was like, wow. Like everyone in the room had nothing positive to say or had no positive feelings about the moon in Scorpio. And so on the one hand, I felt a little bit sad because, my husband and I both have the moon in Scorpio. So I was a little bit like, that's interesting that people have such strong feelings about, a planet in a particular sign. And I also felt a little bit misunderstood because, everyone, of course, has their own way of living out a particular energy, a particular placement in their chart, But, from a soul-based perspective, the moon in Scorpio is a very deep feeling energy. It wants intimacy. It wants to connect. It wants to bond with others. It wants to feel safe and empowered. And the thing with the moon in Scorpio, if the moon in Scorpio person doesn't feel safe and empowered, they will either retreat or they will block, because they will lash out. They could lash out as well. But it's really about safety and this empowerment with moon in Scorpio people. So, they feel things very intensely. And so sometimes it is difficult for other people to relate or to understand a person that has a moon in Scorpio because it's a kind of intensity that another person may not understand, because they simply can't relate. They don't have it. Do you know what I mean? But it's also a very passionate moon placement. My experience, all the people that I know that have the moon in Scorpio are very passionate people, and they just seek complete authenticity in regards to feelings. When it comes to feelings, they want to feel this sense of connecting in a very real way with people, where it's authentic, because they can feel when someone's being inauthentic. They have like X-ray vision when it comes to their feelings, right? They just know when someone's not being honest, or if someone's not actually saying to them what they're feeling in the moment. A moon in Scorpio person will know that right away. You can't fool a moon in Scorpio person, right? They can sense it. So, obviously, this is something that I can't go into every single sign and every single planet right now in the time that we have for the intro. But I will go into great detail in each of these planets and signs in my 6-week course, in the basics course that I'm going to be doing in the end of this month. So, with astrology, there are different layers, and I want to give a quick example here. For those of you who are fairly new to astrology, who maybe, have just dabbled a little bit in some of the basics, I want to just quickly say, what a birth chart is, what transits are, and what progressions are, because we talked a little bit about all these things already, and I wasn't sure if everybody was completely clear on that. So the birth chart, for those of you who are not clear, is just a snapshot of the energies, how they were in place when you were born. So when you took your first breath, there was that moment in time was holding a particular energy, and that energy gets symbolized by the birth chart, because the birth chart shows how the planets were situated in the sky at the time of your birth. And each of the planets symbolizes is a particular archetype of energy. It symbolizes that energy. So you can see in a birth chart for each person what their energies are about, how they interact with each other, and what they came here to do in this lifetime, right? Now, the transits are basically, they show us how the planets are in the sky right now and how that relates to our birth chart. So we can see how something is in the sky, and then we look at the birth chart and we look at it in comparison, and then we can say, oh, okay, so this planet right now is moving over my personal birth sun or my Venus, and it's making this and this aspect, and that tells us a story, right? Now, progressions are basically how the planets have evolved since the time of the birth. And they basically tell us how our internal evolvement is in terms of how we feel internally. We've experienced life a little, we've lived life, and so the planets they progress, they evolve, right? And so that's what progressions are. So we also look at progressions in relationship to the birth chart again, because everything is in relationship to the birth chart, because that's always the base. That's our blueprint, and that's what everything is built on, right? It's the foundation. The birth chart is the foundation. Is everyone clear on all of those things, or are there any questions around that? What I just shared with the birth chart and the transits and the progressions. Just want to check in with you guys to make sure that we're all good. Yeah, Jackie says she's good. Everybody else good? Guys, if you can, it would be very helpful if you just write something very quick in the chat window, because it helps me to know that we're all on the same page and that we're all connecting. Since I can't see any of you, you can all see me, but I can't see any of you, so I'm a little bit in a disadvantage here. So if you can just sometimes chat with me, that would be really great, because then I know we're still connected, and that would be helpful to me. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for typing and taking the time. So let's continue, right? So traditional astrology, when it comes to transits and progressions, they use transits and progressions to predict the future and to try to prevent disasters from happening, right? To give you kind of like a heads up, right? Now, people sometimes ask me, certain clients will ask me, when am I going to die? Or when will I get married? Or questions like that, where they really want a particular answer from me. And, these questions are very tricky because, first of all, I mean, on an ethical level, I definitely never ever want to tell anybody when they're going to die. Not that I can even read that in a chart, because there are a lot of different aspects that could indicate death, but they don't necessarily have to indicate a physical death. They could also just be an emotional or psychological death. So it's not like you can actually predict dying in a very specific way, right? But these questions are very interesting to me, because I always say to people, first of all, you have free will. And this is something that's very important to remember with astrology, that this is just a tool. This doesn't take away your choices. This doesn't take away that you have free will and you do whatever you think you need to do, right? This is just a tool. It's like a guidance system. It's like helping you to understand where you're at. But it's not taking away the kind of decisions that you may have to make for your life, right? And then the other thing with these questions is that, it all depends also on your inner readiness of something. If someone asks me, when will I get married? I mean, there are many opportunities that I can point out for a person when it would be a good time to get married, and when I can see a relationship coming in and things like that, right? But, it doesn't take away from that person's evolution of, are they ready on an emotional level, on a physical level, on a financial level, on a legal level, right? Like, is all of that in place for them to even get married? I mean, who are we talking to? Are we talking to a child here? Are we talking to someone who's just got out of a damaging relationship, and they're asking me, when am I going to meet the next person? So these are all things that have to be considered. So it's very important with astrology too to remember that, it's not a fortune cookie. It's really just a guidance. Now, in soul-based astrology, the way I use transits and progressions is I use them to guide us towards greater fulfillment and to help us grow. So it's really about the growing process of us as human beings and on a soul level, right? Now, let me give you another example, right? So, because I think examples are very useful to understand these points much better. So let's talk about a planet, right? Let's talk about Saturn, because Saturn in traditional astrology has a lot to do with, restrictions, fear, limitations, authority figures, things like that, right? Now, if you notice, when I talk about Saturn in that way, this indicates that that energy, that Saturn energy, is very much being projected out onto other people, right? Rather than owning the energy within ourselves, because everyone has Saturn in their chart somewhere. We all have a Saturn energy inside of us, right? So instead of owning it, we're at the effect end of Saturn if we're thinking of it in these ways of restriction and fear and limitation in these ways, right? So of course, when you're at the effect end of a planet, right, then you become the victim. You become the victim of your outside circumstances. And so the question here is that really empowering, and is that useful for anybody? Is that useful for you to believe that you are, at the effect of a planet, right? So in soul-based astrology, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to teach that every planet's energy has its usefulness, and that there is a way to learn something about ourselves or our life, and to evolve on a soul level with every particular energy, whether that's in our chart, in our birth chart, or whether that's by transit, right? So if we look at Saturn here as the example, right? Saturn in soul-based astrology is about the maturity process that we're experiencing in this world, in this material world, because Saturn is all about manifestation. And so it's about the manifestation in the material, on this earth, in this physical body. And it's also about restriction and fear, but restriction and fear, I would say, has a lot to do. Instead of saying restriction and fear, we could say, healthy caution and healthy boundaries, right? Because we all need in us, in order to live in this world, we need healthy caution, and we need healthy boundaries, because you cannot exist with other people if you don't have that, right? Now, instead of saying limitation, what you can say about Saturn is that it's about structure and time, right? That everything sort of like in the material world, on this planet, there is such a thing as structure, and there is such a thing as time, and it helps us in the manifestation process. If we're not interested in manifesting anything on this planet, in this world, then, Saturn would probably not play a big part in our lives, but most of us have come into this physical body to work through some things, and Saturn is a big part of that. Saturn is our teacher. Yes, thank you, Cynthia. Very good. Yeah, and time is a nice buffer sometimes. Exactly, Felipe. Yeah, because time helps us in the manifestation process. If something goes too fast, we can't digest it. We can't, it gets too overwhelming. So sometimes it's a good thing to slow down, or to have to slow down, because we get to really learn something on a much deeper level, right? Now, authority, right? Authority is a part that belongs to Saturn as well. And, instead of thinking of it as authority imposed from the outside world, we could think of it as, taking responsibility and making commitments on this physical plane and becoming our own authority, like really tapping into our inner authority and taking that responsibility and saying, I am the master and I can do it, right? Like I can manifest things. Just kind of tapping into that adult, mature place in us, right? And making long-term commitments. That's part of Saturn, right? And Saturn is also where the focus needs to be. Saturn is a very focused energy. Without Saturn, we would all have ADD. We would all be like all over the place and be like, like not being able to focus on anything, And so Saturn is can be a very supportive, and it's a very necessary energy in our chart. So the more we can embrace all of these energies, the better off we are, of course, right? So if we want to learn lessons about the physical structure of things and building something long term, Saturn is our guy. Saturn is our energy that we have within us that helps us to make that happen, right? So of course, I'm not going to be able to go into all the planets today, because we don't have the time to do that, but I will in great detail go into all the planets and their soul-based astrology meaning in my 6-week basics course. Okay. Now, at the beginning of, before I continue, and anybody has a question before I continue, I don't want to like hose you guys with information because I want to make sure that we're all still able to take it all in, because I know it sometimes gets a little bit overwhelming since we all have a lot going on in our lives. Is everyone still with me? No questions, all good. Okay, great, guys. So thanks for being in communication via the chat window, by the way. I appreciate it. All right, so at the beginning of the call, I mentioned that I wanted to give you something of value by the end of this call that you can take with you, something that you can use in your day-to-day life that doesn't require any further astrological training. And the thing that I was referring to is it's something that you can use actually every days or even less than 2.5 days. So how many of you have heard of the moon void of course? How many of you know what that is? Just want to check in, see how many of us have an idea of what that is. Nope. Yes? Lilith? No. No, it's not Lilith. So, yes? No. Okay, great. So it's sort of like 50-50, right? So let's see if those of you who said yes can learn something different as well from what I'm sharing right now. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the moon void, of course. So in traditional astrology, the moon void, of course, is a time when things will not work out, or where there's no nothing has a sustained existence, where something is just kind of like not connecting, right? Now, the soul-based approach of the moon void, of course, is that the way it benefits us is that instead of feeling scared about the moon void, of course, and instead of feeling like, oh my God, this is a bad time for me right now, right? The way to use the moon void, of course, is to think of it as a very feminine time, a very creative time. It's a time of introspection. It's a time where we want to receive. It's a very intuitive time. It's a great time for things like research, nurturing our body, nurturing our mind, spirit, doing something creative, a spiritual endeavor, getting coaching or a therapy session, doing energy healing during that time is very powerful, getting a massage, journaling, going over what you've recently learned or experienced. Resting is a big one, and I have to be honest, I use the moon void, of course, very much for resting because I'm not very good at that. I'm not very good at resting. So whenever moon's void, of course, I go, okay, it's my time to rest. I'm allowed. So it's kind of like a good thing for me that I have that in my life structure, because otherwise I probably wouldn't rest at all. I mean, of course, when I, at night when I go to sleep, but other than that, I probably wouldn't. So resting is a good thing to do during the moon void, of course. Going with the flow, meditation is great for the moon void, of course, and any kind of daily routine. Okay, so anything that you do on a daily basis all the time is good for the moon void, of course. All right. Now, if you want to find out about the moon void, of course, phases, when they are, right, you can go to my weekly blog, because I write every week. I will tell you exactly when the moon void, of course, phases are. And Anna is going to be so kind and write into the chat window right now the website where the blog is, and so you can click on that for yourself, and you can save that in your bookmarks if you like. Okay, so and here it is already. Thanks, Anna. Now just before we actually continue, I want to also say, in terms of the moon void, of course, I mean, I talked about what it's good for, but what happens? What happens when the moon goes void, of course? What happens is that the moon changes signs from one sign to the next every 2.5 days. So the moon cycle is 28 days, right? And every 2.5 days, the moon changes into a new sign, and then after 28 days, the moon cycle is complete. It's been once around the whole zodiac signs, right? But every time the moon right before the moon changes into a new sign, it makes an aspect. It makes the last aspect that the moon makes to any of the other planets, the major planets. I'm talking about the major main planets, right? So not any asteroids or any like fancy stuff that's super advanced, just the main planets that we have in our chart. The last aspect that the moon makes to a major aspect to one of the regular planets, after that, and before it moves into the new sign, that's the phase when the moon is void of course. And this varies from time to time. Like every time the moon changes signs, that last aspect doesn't always happen at the same time, right before it changes sign. It happens sometimes 2 hours before the moon changes into the new sign. Sometimes it happens 12 hours or 20 hours before the moon changes into the new sign, right? So the moon void, of course, can be as short as a couple of minutes, and it can be as long as 48 hours. You know, I think the longest moon void, of course, was 48 hours, or something ridiculous like that. Of course, that doesn't happen very often. You know, I just want to say that too. It doesn't happen very often that it's that long. But anywhere between, you know, a couple of minutes and you know, maybe one day could be the moon void, of course. All right. Anybody have any questions about that, or did that make sense what I just shared with the moon void, of course? Just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Would it be the same across the world? Well, yes, just that, of course, in different time zones, you know, you have the moon void, of course, in my time zone is not going to be the same as in Australia or in Europe, right? So you have to transfer the time zone. So if the moon void, of course, let's say starts at 2 p.m. in New York, then, of course, 2 p.m. New York time is, 8 p.m. Paris time, right? So then the moon void, of course, would start at 8 p.m. in Paris. So you have to definitely, depending on where you live in the world, you have to consider the time differences in terms of that, in terms of your own time zone. All right? Okay. So let's continue. So astrology, is not, I would say, personally, astrology is not a tool that helps us predict the future, but I would say astrology is a tool that helps us with our creation process or co-creation process with the universe, because it's really helpful to kind of use the energies as a guidance system in how we want to create and what we want to create and what we want to manifest and how we want to evolve. And this is a very beautiful partnership. You know, astrology can be a real partnership between you and the universe. And that's really how I see it. And I think if we don't use it as such, if we don't use it as a partnership, then I would say that we're not really willing to learn and evolve. And we're not really following our highest purpose. And when we don't do that, of course, then we get unhappy, we get depressed, we get angry at life. But, if we can use astrology as a partnership with the universe, like letting us be guided energetically by the universe, then we can really get somewhere. We can really grow and evolve and have a much more fulfilled life. And, if you showed up for this class today, then I would say you were probably interested in learning and evolving. You're probably interested in following your highest purpose. And you're probably ready to align yourself with the infinite creative powers of the universe as you can co-create your unique and amazing life. Am I right? Any of you in that category? Who is not in that category? Tell us now. Tell us now if you don't want to evolve. Be honest. Okay. So, of course, if you want to take advantage of these powerful tools that Soul-Based Astrology has to offer, this is the reason also why I created a 6-week course, the basics course, which can really bring a much deeper grounding into Soul-Based Astrology and know what it's all about. So would it be okay with you guys if I share just a little bit about that course before we get to the question and answer part? Would that be okay with you guys? Yeah? Okay, great. Awesome. Thanks so much. All right, so let me actually go to that next slide. And let me just show you. So the course that I created is called Soul-Based Astrology, the basics course. And the way I structured it is that you really can enjoy it no matter what your current level of astrology understanding is. And so even if you're already well versed in astrology, it's definitely a wonderful way to kind of go a little bit deeper into the soul-based experience. And you'll definitely learn everything you need to know to start applying these soul-based astrology principles to your relationships, to your financial life, to your long-term goals. And of course, you will also explore, the soul's journey and the soul purpose in your chart, right? And also this intro here is being recorded. So I wanted to offer to all of you who are on the call today, you can share this recording with your friends and family for free if you like. Also you can listen to it yourself one more time if that's valuable to you. All right, is everybody cool? Is everybody clear with everything that I've shared so far? With the classes, the courses, everyone on board with me? Okay, awesome. Okay, great. Very good. So now the time is here. We have time for questions and answers. So I hope you guys are ready and you're excited to do some Q&A with me. I do have one question already that someone sent to me in advance. So I wanted to actually, let me just put this here real quick. I wanted to, before we go to the Q&A, let me just say this. You can sign up for any of the classes here on my website at AstrologerCoach.com. And if you have questions, you can either send me an email, or if you wanna send Anna an email, because I'm of course busy a lot of the time. If you want to get a quicker answer, then please feel free to email Anna at info@astrologercoach.com. Okay, guys. So let's go to the Q&A. There was one question that someone sent to me already in advance. Oh, okay. Felipe had a question and I missed it. All right. So let me go back. About the void of Chorus Moon. Can you type it in for me again? Because I'm sorry, I can't find it anymore. But let's, if it is similar to the retrograde. Oh, thank you for that question, Felipe. I would say yes and no. It is a little bit similar. With the retrograde planets, it really depends on which planet we're talking about. It becomes a little bit more specific to the planet. But the retrograde, I would say, is always a needing to go more inward, more internally. It's more introspective, but it's connected to the energy of that particular planet. So if we're talking about a Mercury retrograde, it has to do with our thinking processes. If we're talking about a Venus retrograde, it has to do with with what we value and how much we value ourselves. Of course, right now Venus is retrograde, so all of us are needing to kind of go more inside to kind of tap into our own value of ourselves and how much we can value ourselves and how we can value ourselves better. Right? Does that answer your question, Felipe? Just want to make sure. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, so let's look at this question here. I think this was from Felipe as well, right? Felipe, is this your question, unconditional love? Where can we find a better understanding of that in astrology? Yeah, okay, great. So that's a great question. Thank you so much for that, Felipe. Now, when we look at the astrology chart, in the birth chart, I would say unconditional love is very much connected to Neptune. Neptune is the planet of compassion and the planet of unconditional love. It's very much about being connected to everything. It's the planet that teaches us that energy connects us to everybody around us. That they're on an energetic level. If you think about it, right? Yes, we all have separate physical bodies, but if we go look a little bit closer on an energetic level, The physical body is just molecules and atoms, right, that are just moving around. Everything that we can touch and see is molecules and atoms. So on an energetic level, everything's moving and everything's in connection with each other, through the air, because the air is also filled with molecules, right? So on an energetic level, we're all one. And so Neptune teaches us about that, teaches us about that oneness, and teaches us about that connection. And so that's also, of course, about unconditional love. Because, you love someone else, you love yourself. You love yourself, you love someone else. Right? I mean, the more you can love yourself, the more you can love everybody around you as well. And the more whole we can be, and this is also the process, of course, of soul-based astrology, right? The more whole we can be, the more we can connect with everybody around us in a loving and kind way. Yes, Philippi, that's a beautiful analogy, and I use this analogy all the time. It's really like the ocean, unconditional love and Neptune. It's like the ocean, it's a very, the ocean goes everywhere. It goes to, it connects all the waters. It connects the earth and the water. It's connected to the air, to the, it's just, it's like the ocean. Very good. Very good. It's a great analogy. The ocean refuses no river. That's right, Jackie. The ocean refuses no river. I like that. That's beautiful. Yes. All right. So are there any other questions? Because I didn't really receive any other questions via email, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys, get everything answered that you came here with today. Francesca, do you have any questions? Or Cynthia, Tim, Morgana, any questions? Anybody wants to add? Because we still have 10 minutes to be together, so feel free to type away and to get the maximum value, right? So with that, and back to Saturn, unity with love in Neptune. How does this relate to Saturn and boundaries? Thank you for that question. Thank you, Tim. Well, I would say that, Saturn and Neptune, of course, are very different in their energy, right? Neptune is the connector in terms of, bringing everything together and making everything one. Saturn, on the other hand, is the energy within us that wants to manifest things in the real world. And in order for us to manifest in this physical body, in this physical plane, we need to create healthy boundaries, and we need to use the Saturn energy in a way that helps us understand the physical experience, right? So Saturn is really just helping us to understand the physical experience, because, we're all spirit beings in a physical body, right? So once we have arrived on this planet, we are in a physical body. But once we leave this planet, we're again in spirit form, right? But so while we're here in this physical body, we need to learn what it means to be separate as well. So it's really, we're living in a duality place in this world, right? And we're learning, with Neptune, we're learning that duality doesn't necessarily, that duality is not real on a soul level. That duality is not real on an energetic level. But what we learn in a physical body is that we need to live in this dualistic world, and we need to be able to manifest things for ourselves and learn about this world. Like I always give this example, like, for example, if you are a spirit and you don't have a physical body, right? You can just walk through a door. You don't, it's just, boom, you just go straight through it, or you can walk through a window, go straight through it, because you don't have matter, right? There's no matter. There's no physical matter. When you have a physical body, you need to take the handle of the door, you need to put it down, you need to open the door, you need to walk into the room, and you need to close the door. So Saturn slows us down. You know, the physical experience slows us down, but it's what we need to learn, because it also helps us in learning about manifesting physical things. Okay, does that answer your question, Tim? I know this is a very complex subject, you know, Saturn and all, but each of us has, of course, both of these energies within us, you know. Could you say something basic about how the comets and asteroids affect the chart? Well, well, I mean, let me just say this. I don't include comets and asteroids in my charts when I read for people, and I don't teach about it. So I would say that I'm maybe not the best person to ask that question. I do believe that comets and asteroids are interesting. I do believe that they're definitely adding a layer of knowledge and experience to a particular chart. But I also, I personally find that astrology is so complex and gives us so much information already just with the regular planets, that comets and asteroids, it feels, sometimes it gets a little bit too overwhelming, you know, when you add all these, because you can go endless with that in astrology. I mean, you can add 100 comets and asteroids to your chart, and then you have a chart that's just filled with stuff. And to me, that's, you know, I'm wondering, you know, how helpful, how useful can that be for a person? You know, I tend to get overwhelmed with that, so I don't use it. So I'm sorry I can't really speak to that as much. Does that answer your question, Jackie? Okay, so let me go back, because I think there were some other questions that I missed. What are houses? Okay, so Francesca asked a question about the houses. But, you know, when you look at the chart, you have all, it's a circle, and you have all the signs inside the circle, and you have houses that sort of like symbolize particular areas of your life, right? And the houses are really there. They show us, you know, like if you look at the ascendant, for example, the ascendant is on the very left side of the chart, right? And the ascendant is always the first house. That's where the first house begins, right? So the first area of your life. And the ascendant is what we feel identified with. It's our persona. It's a new beginning. It's when it's, you know, it's the sign that was on the horizon when we took our first breath, right? So when you took your first breath as a baby, that sign that was on that horizon was, you know, that was on the horizon was when you took your first breath. So basically that symbolizes then a fresh beginning for you and how you begin things in life, but also like how you introduce yourself to life or to other people, right? And so that's the first house. And then, you know, each house represents an area of your life. Now, I'm not going to go into all the 12 houses because obviously that will take too long, but we will go into that in great detail in the basics course, you know, so that's definitely all included and also in what each of these areas represents for us, right? Does that answer your question, Francesca? Just want to make sure. Yeah. Okay, guys, so thanks for being on the call with me. If everybody is complete and everybody is satisfied with their questions and what they, I hope this was valuable for all of you. I hope you guys got a lot out of this session.